Today's meditation, we will read 2 Samuel chapter 15, verses 1 to 12. After this, Absalom got himself a chariot and horses, and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way of the gate. And when any man had a dispute to come before the king for judgment, Absalom would call to him and say, "From what city are you?" And when he said, "Your servant is of such and such a tribe in Israel," Absalom would say to him, "See, your claims are good and right, but there is no man designated by the king to hear you." Then Absalom would say, "Oh, that I would judge in the land. Then every man with a dispute or cause might come to me, and I would give him justice." And whenever a man came near to pay homage to him, he would put out his hand and take hold of him and kiss him. Thus Absalom did to all of Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. And at the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Please let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed to the Lord in Hebron. For your servant vowed a vow while I lived in Geshur in Aram, saying, 'If the Lord will indeed bring me back to Jerusalem, then I will offer worship to the Lord.' The king said to him, 'Go in peace.' So he arose and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent secret messengers throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, 'As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then say, Absalom is king at Hebron.' With Absalom went 200 men from Jerusalem, who were invited guests, and they went in their innocence and knew nothing. And while Absalom was offering the sacrifices, he sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor from his city Gilo. And the conspiracy grew strong, and the people with Absalom kept increasing." This chapter depicts Absalom's selfish ambition that drew him into a dangerous and destructive pattern of behavior. When anyone allows their ambition to rule them, the end is ruin and disorder for those who seek power, as well as those around them. David's rise to power was marked by God's choice, a lack of personal ambition or greed, and trust in God. Chosen by God at a young age to be the king of Israel, he waited for God to open the way to the throne, refusing to assassinate or cast out the then king Saul. This patience and submission to God's will are marks of David's character. After Saul's end in battle, David was accepted as king by his own tribe, Judah, but not the rest of the Israelite tribes. It took 7.5 years before he was crowned king of all Israel. At that time, however, he was unhesitatingly accepted even by the tribe of Benjamin, from which Saul had sprung. In contrast, Absalom, David's son, was always discontented. Having taken a full revenge on his half-brother Amnon by killing him for his violation of Tamar's chastity, he had fled from David, taking refuge with his grandfather, the king of the neighboring country of Geshur. However, he was soon pardoned and allowed to come back to live in Jerusalem, but not at the court. He quickly took measures to persuade his father to let him return to the court too, and was rapidly welcomed back into royal favor. Yet he was not content. He wanted not to be near David, who loved him far beyond his deserts, but to be king in place of David himself. Love, acceptance, and restoration to the royal family were not enough. He needed to be greater still. Absalom's campaign to steal the throne from David was marked by cunning and manipulation. He spent his day winning friends to himself at the city gate. There he could meet and sympathize with those who arrived seeking justice from the king. They were expectant at their arrival, knowing they could present their cause to David, who would give them a wise and godly decision. However, Absalom diverted their thoughts to their ostensible deprivation by David, who did not appoint judges and officials to settle their disputes. He would have so done, he claimed. Thus, he subtly painted David as a negligent and lazy ruler, undermining his father's royal authority and building support for himself. Absalom's ambition reflects the worldly wisdom often used by those who seek power for selfish reasons. He worked hard, rising early each day to greet the vulnerable and dissatisfied among the people who would be likely to form his support base. His approach was methodical and calculated, appealing to the natural tendency to think of one's rights, grievances, and desires rather than one's duties, mercies, and loyalties. This fleshly wisdom was rooted in deception and manipulation. As James chapter 3 verse 13 to 16 warns, selfish ambition leads to disorder and every evil practice. We read, "For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice." For 4 years, Absalom secretly plotted to overthrow his father. When the time was ripe, he used David's devotion to mislead him about his intention to wrest the throne from him at Hebron. He pretended he had made a vow at Geshur, promising the Lord that he would sacrifice at Hebron if he made it back safely to Jerusalem. Absalom also misled the people he invited to join him there, hiding his true intentions until it was too late. Selfish ambition often works through deceit, and for those consumed by it, the ends always justify the means. Absalom's rebellion forced David to flee Jerusalem. David continued to display remarkable humility and submission to God's will. He refused to put his people at risk of civil war, instead fleeing Jerusalem with a chosen force. He entrusted his future to God's sovereignty. In verses 25 to 26, David instructs Zadok, the priest, to return the Ark of the Covenant to the city, saying, "If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back, and let me see both it and his dwelling place. But if he says, 'I have no pleasure in you, behold, here I am,' let him do to me what seems good to him." David's trust in God's plan, even in the face of betrayal and loss, contrasts sharply with Absalom's self-centered pursuit of power. David chose to leave the immediate outcome in God's hands, knowing that if God willed, he would be restored to the throne. His actions remind us of 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 6, where Peter says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you." Absalom's ambition was destructive not only for himself, but also for the entire nation. His pursuit of power led to civil war and ultimately his death. He brought ruin upon himself and heartache to his father. Selfish ambition is devilish because it places personal desires above God's will and the well-being of others. David, on the other hand, finished well by entrusting his future to God even as he prepared to defend his throne against attack by Absalom and his renegade army. Despite the pain of betrayal and the uncertainty of his future, David continued to worship God, trusting not in his position or power, but in God's sovereign plan. Our true success comes not from striving for personal gain, but from yielding ourselves to God's will. We need to allow God to fulfill His highest plan for us, submitting humbly to His timing in all things. God bless.